Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wine.com Experiences. I'm Gwendolyn Osborne. So today we are talking about Cabernet Sauvignon and its place as the backbone in a wine list at every classic steakhouse. And speaking of steakhouses, this trio that we are tasting is an exclusive partnership between Wine.com and Landry's. If you're not familiar with Landry's, you probably are, but it's because it owns and operates three of our favorite steakhouses in this country, including The Palm, Morton's, and Del Frisco's. So we will be tasting these three wines that are part of these steakhouses, part of their program, sold in the restaurants, chatting with the winemakers behind them, as well as speaking with the chef of The Palm and Master Sommelier from Landry's. So if you purchase the wines ahead of time, fantastic. Please go ahead and get them open, pour them each into a glass. We will be tasting them kind of side by side in order. If you don't have the wines, that's okay. I think you will absolutely still have a great time enjoying our discussion. And it'll probably make you want to go to Wine.com and buy these wines. This trio is exclusive on Wine.com. Otherwise, you can absolutely go to any of these restaurants and enjoy them there. But if you would like to have these three at home to enjoy, it's the legendary Steakhouse trio on Wine.com, and you'll want to snag those up. And of course, this video lives on our Wine.com YouTube channel. You can always revisit it. So as you just saw there are three wines we're tasting in order. It's the Raymond Primal Cut Sauvignon, Cabernet Sauvignon, the Butcher's Choice Cabernet Sauvignon, and then the Lot 1981 Cabernet Sauvignon from Duckhorn. So I think it's time that we introduce our guest. So from Landry's, we have Chef Michael Coury. We also have joining us, hello, Michael. Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. We also have Master Sommelier, Keith Goldston, Master Sommelier of Landry's, so all restaurants. Hi, Keith. Then also we have Stephanie Putnam, who is Director of Winemaking at Raymond Vineyards. Hi, Stephanie. And then Dana Epperson, who is VP of Winemaking at Duckhorn. Welcome, everyone. So excited to have you here. We're going to be tasting these great wines, talking about steak and the steakhouses and how everything pairs together. Before we start tasting, I kind of want to talk a little bit about Landry's. Michael, maybe I'll speak to you. You're the chef at The Palm, but maybe you can give us a little bit of an idea of kind of, we're tasting from three different steakhouses from Landry. So maybe a little bit about the concept among the three.
Oh, definitely. Steakhouses are definitely Americana, but there's definitely specifics between them that makes them different between just the decor vibe concept. The Palm, where I am the concept chef for, we have a really rich Italian-American heritage. New York City, it became the Palm because the two original owners were from Parma, and they didn't understand their accent, and they thought they were saying Palm. So instead of Emilia Romano and Parma, they got a business license that said Palm. So that's how the Palm developed. Morton's obviously legendary, that Midwestern classic steakhouse, and then Del Frisco's a little newer and definitely classic American steakhouse there. So that really the concepts are very different. Although, and strangely enough, we all use different meat companies and things because. There's a big difference. You say Cabernet, you taste them, they taste different, just like meats do. So
it's a good point. Thank you. So speaking of Cabernet, Keith, maybe, I know it's kind of a big question with probably a broad answer, but just kind of to you, what makes Cabernet Sauvignon this ideal pairing for steak, kind of the king of the steakhouse wine list?
I mean, first off, it's delicious. I mean, that is just such a go-to. Is I kind of feel like once you realize how great wine is, and whether your gateway might be White Zinfandel, it might be a wine cooler back in the day, but kind of once you realize I like wine, then for a lot of people, Cabernet is like the first serious red they have, and for a lot of us, you never move past. You're like, this is amazing, and it's just something about that big, full-bodied, almost umami THX Dolby kind of just raw in your palate when you take a sip. And then you have just the delicious kind of blackberry cassis flavors that play out almost everywhere in the world you grow Cabernet Sauvignon. Mm-hmm. And then there's this balance of the grape because it's a tiny little grape berry and it has pretty thick skins. So you end up with a lot of tannins, and it's just this wonderful kind of combination of sweet fruit and bitter. And It just inherently has this great balance. And those tannins, particularly with like a steak, on a molecular level, they actually will bond with the fats in the meat, and it makes it even richer, more intense, and it makes the meat seem better. Mm-hmm. And it makes the wine even more silky, smooth, and powerful. So it's just this very kind of, like milk and cookies. They were just meant to go together.
Yeah, I know. And I remember kind of learning that too in like a food pairing course of just like what tannin, it's like, yes, fat and protein. And so it's like, oh, here's a steak. Duh. Right.
Or another great example of that is how delicious is like coffee and bacon. And coffee
is yes.
super bitter. Then you have a piece of bacon, you're like, I like bacon, but now I love bacon.
Love bacon. And I can probably drink coffee without my milk in it if I have it with bacon. So instead, I'm just going to start dipping bacon in. There you go. My morning is solved. Thank you. Yeah, great. So we'll get more into kind of specifics here on each cab and the steak. Starting with our first pair is going to be the Primal Cut Cabernet Sauvignon, which was made specifically for Morton's Steakhouse. Stephanie from Raymond Winery. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello.
Hi. So first a little bit about Raymond. So the Raymond and Cabernet, what is kind of the philosophy with Raymond, where the grapes are grown, the style produced?
That's a really big question. I'll try to answer it super quick, right? When Jean-Charles purchased the winery in 2009, we sat down and tried to decide what we wanted our style to be going forward. What were we? What we are now, and where we want to go. And we really decided that we kind of wanted to be what we call the new vision of Napa, meaning that we wanted to really embrace the power and the boldness of Napa, but as a female winemaker, really wanted to try and work on the elegance and the balance of the wine. And that elegance and balance for me is the most important thing. You could be making a $10 bottle of wine or a $5,000 bottle of wine. And as long as a balance is important, if it's seamless from start to finish, that's what makes it a beautiful wine.
Absolutely. Yeah. The balance, secret to life. So the Primal Cut, can you tell us a little bit about kind of what's unique about the Primal Cut bottling here for Morton's?
This wine was actually a really fun project. It started off due to the great friendship that Jean-Charles Boisset has with the Morton's Landry's group in general. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember how exactly it came about, but I'm pretty sure they were having lunch or dinner over with wine, perhaps steak, and they decided we need to do a project together. And it's really important for us. This is also part of our philosophy at Raymond. We want to make the wines affordable. Mm-hmm. So in order for it to be affordable by the bottle or by the glass, we thought it needed to be a North Coast appellation. Napa Valley is a very expensive place, and we wanted to make it affordable. So we chose a North Coast appellation. This particular wine is about 1/3 Napa, 2/3 Sonoma, with a splash of Lake County thrown in. Mm-hmm. But the really great fun on this is that typically Tyler and Keith will fly out. We will have a little blending session together. I will literally let them play with some Napa Cab, Napa Merlot, Sonoma Cab, Sonoma Merlot. They love Cab Franc. I very rarely let them have it, but they always ask me every year, can we have some Cab Franc? And occasionally I will say, here you go. You have 1% Cab Franc, and that's all you get. But we sit down and we play. They taste all the wines. We make different blends. And then we decide as a group which one we think matches the style of what we're going for. We're going for a cab that has all the elements of a Napa Cab. It has the power and the structure. I'm trying to be big here. It's hard when you're not even 5 foot, but just imagine, you want it to be big and bold, but also again, power and finesse and balance. So we want to kind of represent all of that. And we've really found that the Napa, Sonoma, and Lake County appellations really blend together to give you that balance and that what I call more of an alluring Cabernet characteristic.
Okay, it sounds so tempting now to drink, but I love that. Although 1% Cabernet Franc can go a long way, just so.
It can, but the entire world knows, and it's a running joke, that Stephanie is not always the biggest fan of Cab Franc. However, this is an important lesson in life as well. Just because you don't always like something as it is, doesn't mean it's not going to make something better if you add it in. So even though I don't always love it, I always play with it. And a lot of times it makes it better.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's the secret of blending. So, well, let's taste this wine and maybe kind of talk us through those, kind of what's coming out here in the aromas and the flavor and the structure and where that's all coming from.
So for me, it is a very alluring wine. I immediately get a lot of plum, like dark plum, some cassis, and a lot of what I'll call really dark chocolate, like maybe 80% dark chocolate. So something like that pure cacao bean characteristic. There's a little bit of a roasted coffee element to that. I did say this is about 1/3 Napa and 2/3 Sonoma with a splash of Lake. And the Napa that we usually use is Rutherford. And I think that there is no better pairing for Cabernet than Rutherford Cabernet with steak. And so having that splash of Rutherford Cab that gives it more structure and more tannin and more power is really, really critical. So a lot of the fruit, 20% of the fruit comes from our estate here in Rutherford. And then the balance it actually comes from the Chalk Hill area within Sonoma. So you get a little more fresher, brighter acidity in that area. And so that power and the acidity makes it a great food pairing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And once you said that coffee, I was like, what am I getting? I was like, it's when I load my coffee machine in the morning, that kind of aroma is totally coming through. But yeah, the balance between the tannin, and they're soft tannins, but the acidity as well. And then that rich fruit.
And the acidity in wine is something that's really, people don't really talk about it so much, but the acidity in wine is what makes you salivate. It's what makes you want more wine, more food. And so that acidity is hugely important when it comes to creating great food and wine pairings.
It's very true. And I don't think people talk as much about acidity with red wines, especially. It's very noticeable usually in white wines, but not always in red wines. But I definitely get it here. I get it on the sides of my mouth. I am salivating. And yes, it makes me want a steak.
Does it want you a steak? Like a fillet?
I want me a steak.
Or what other kind of meat?
I would take actually like a really nice pork tenderloin or pork chop on the grill where it gets all like kind of all the juices are there. So
I'm hungry now.
Okay. I haven't had dinner yet. So like, can we stop talking about speaking of steak and meat though, Michael, tell us a little about the Morton's recipe meant to pair with this wine. It's on the sheet. We have a mat that kind of went out with some people, and I looked at that, and it's a very simple recipe. It's just a giant piece of steak with some seasoning. But talk to us a little bit about that. And
sure. So it's really kind of to really feed off of Stephanie and the description that she described. It is a tomahawk ribeye, which has first off, it's massive, the big beautiful bone on it, and you have the marbling in ribeye. There is plenty of fat and marbling in there to go with some of the elements that she was speaking of that's in the wine. So the grilling it and being able to get that char from it is really imperative to bring out those different flavors, and the acidity that you're tasting really enhances not only the char, but then also the fat element into it. The one picture that you showed, which I always love, there was some Malden salt to finish. And I always finish, and especially at the Palm, I know we're talking about Morton's, but if you're at home and you go and get a little bit of that Malden salt to finish your steak with, it will really enhance not only the meat itself, because there is so much fat in it, it can mute it a little bit. It'll brighten it up, kind of what acid does, and the acid in that wine will really go well with it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's amazing what salt can do. And I love this recipe because it really has to do with just how great quality the meat is, because it's just such a simple recipe. It's just really bringing out those flavors.
Simple
And
things are very difficult to do. You know, it's easy to hide things with other things, with
right,
simplicity.
exactly. So Keith, tell us about this wine and this meat, and kind of, I mean, we talked a little bit already about the fat, protein, acid, tannin, but why this wine, going through what Stephanie and I spoke of, and this meat, what kind of makes this such a wonderful pairing?
Well, I mean, everyone's kind of really hit on a lot of the key points already. For me, and like speaking of the acidity, I always like to think of it more kind of like lemon lime, think of like acid in forms that people like. And when you think about cuisine, like what doesn't a lemon and lime make taste better? Like almost everything, like carne asada, let's squeeze that lime onto it. It's, and it's just, that balance is so crucial. And the other kind of extreme, and for me, like when I'm teaching wine classes, I love to tell people, like, think of like that overripe banana.
Mm-hmm.
And like how you take like the brown banana, you take a bite and it's just like, blah, and that's because the sugars have gone really high and the acids have dropped, and grapes very much have the same ripening cycle. So if you pick too late, you lose that balance. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you need that crisp, refreshing thing. And it's so important to not have it be, you want it fruity, but not sweet. And right. This really walks a great line of, it makes me, at first when I smell it, I get this kind of not only dark fruit, but also this kind of red fruit. And then the chocolate, like it actually reminds me of like the raspberry Tootsie Pops, which makes me back to a very happy spot in childhood. But then there's this really cool kind of floral lift that comes out of the glass. And Stephanie, I don't know if it's maybe the Petit Verdot. Like there's these kind of high tone floral notes that are really pretty, lavender, violet notes. And then just on the palate, it's full, but also smooth and finishes clean. And that clean finish is so, like, it's hard to replicate. And it's just nice when it's there.
Yeah. And with that steak, that matches well.
Yeah. And I mean, I've heard a lot of people say nothing beats like a slab in a cab. And it's just one of those things where it's like, yes, it's meant to be. And this, for me, I'm always, when I'm buying wine, I'm like, what is this wine trying to be? And is it a good version of that?
Yeah.
When I taste this, I'm like, yes, that tastes like California, really good Cabernet. And even though I grew up in Napa, and, Dana, I'm sorry, but there's that whole like Napa Sonoma rivalry thing going on. But I think this is proof that Napa and Sonoma can get along beautifully and make something phenomenal.
Absolutely. Friendship all the way. And so the Primal Cut, which I kind of also like because the recipe is kind of primal. It's like just a hunk of meat with some seasoning on the grill, and the Primal Cut. And so this can be found at Morton's. Beautiful pairing, except for I don't have the steak, but it sounds like a beautiful pairing. It's a beautiful wine. Loving the wine. So our next wine that we're tasting is called the Butcher's Choice Cabernet Sauvignon. It's also made by Raymond for the Palm Restaurant. Fun label with a fun story. And so Michael, since you are the Palm man, could you tell us a little bit about this label and kind of the little story behind it?
Absolutely. It'd be my honor. I grew up in the area where the original Palm was Palm 1 and Palm 2. So the brand, first of all, being able to be ahead of the culinary piece of the brand is really, really quite an honor to be able to do that in the stories, right? The Palm is all about stories and history. So the label is the first butcher for the Palm. And the Palm started back in 1926. That was the butcher. It was in Palm 1. It was when Palm 1 closed, they cut it out of the wall, and it lives in Houston in our newest location when you walk in their wine cabinet, in their wine room, which my lovely wife happens to be the sommelier for. So it's even extra special to me to see it. But Palm started as just basic Italian fare, and 2nd Avenue in New York City is where all the butchers are. So someone would request a steak and they'd run down the street to the butcher and grab a steak and bring it back and cook it for you. And then they finally got this butcher, and that's who that is, the original.
They got their own butcher rather than just running up and down the street.
I tell you what,
ordering slabs of meat willy-nilly.
Back in the day when getting your steps in wasn't as important, but they got it.
Got it. That's a cool story. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting, cool label for that. So thank you. So so Keith, maybe you can speak to us a little bit about the wine itself. Like tasting the wine, we want to talk through it. So where's it coming from? What kind of was the style we were looking for here for the Palm?
Yeah, absolutely. This was kind of fun because we had that artwork and we're like, this is such a great piece of artwork. Like, how can we kind of allow people to kind of enjoy it at all the Palms? So the idea was, nothing better than a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon in a steakhouse. So with that great partnership with Raymond, we're able to kind of find some actual just Napa Valley cab fruit, and some of it's hillside, some of it's valley floor. And I also love too that it's got a good chunk of American oak, new American oak on it. And it kind of adds this kind of, to me, Tahitian vanilla bean thing. So it's one of those chocolate notes like the last wine, but now you add in the vanilla and it's almost more like a chocolate malt in like kind of a cool, fun way. And then if you smell it, it's just, 18 was a great vintage and it's just much more of that darker, more extracted. And then for me, that hillside kind of brambliness comes through. And I remember like growing up in Napa and like going out in the hills and like going through like blackberry bushes. This just smells, it reminds me of like a summer day. You get the dustiness, you get the blackberry bushes, and it's just a really cool nose. And I like that every time you kind of go in, there's something new. And that's a fun little experiment where you're like, and now it's like the leaves of the blackberry bushes and a little bit of like rosemary kind of sneaking through as well.
And bramble is one of my favorite words. And so I describe it like you do, being like, it's not just the berry, but it's also like the vines and the leaves and the atmosphere of walking in nature with a berry on the bush. And it's one of my favorite terms in wine when you get it.
Yeah. And then going on to the palate, it's just big, lush. And, like when we were talking about tannins, and to me, I don't know if I'm the only person who does this, but I oddly kind of like associate tannins with dogs. And it's like, is it a small dog? Is it a barky dog? Is it a big dog? Mean big dog, friendly big dog. And this is definitely like a golden retriever. Like it's a really big, friendly, happy dog.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That's classic. I love the fact that
I've never heard it either. Oh, I think we're all going to steal this now because we're like big dog people.
Yeah, well, and there's like the small little yippy dog where you're like,
small yippy ones. They're the barkers, or
like unripe Cabernet Franc is totally like the little yippy barky dog.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like my German Shepherd is the aggressive, like.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I feel like that's for me is like more Nebbiolo. It can be aggressive, but in the right mood, it's like.
Oh, exactly. She's a love. She's very protective, right? Just keeping it in there. So. So this is a golden retriever wine. Wonderful. Put that on our page. Yeah. Well, it's lovely. I mean, the finish is grand.
Yeah, and it's just, it's one of those wines that Stephanie, excellent. Like the balance is just spot on again. And then and I don't know if it's a little bit of the hillside coming through, but it's got a really nice play of like sweet and a little savory coming through. And, and I don't know, Chef, if, that savory thing with the veal chop. So Michael, give a little bit of details on this Palm recipe, the Palm restaurant recipe. It's meant to pair with it. It's a pan-fried veal chop, right?
It is. So Clifford the wine and the veal chop. No, so I couldn't let that one go. Sorry. So, but you're right. What's great about this wine is, and I hate to be biased because it is our concept, but the new oak, definitely the vanilla, It has a little bit of tenderness to it. So you're able to, instead of that huge, I think wines are very much like people's personalities. And I definitely probably have more of a personality of this wine, where I could be very bold and how you doing, or have that subtle pieces to it. But it really has the definitely the new oak, and it's a little lighter and has those great lighter finishes in it for veal. Veal is really has a more of a subtle flavor to it, especially we're searing it. So a couple just notes of when you are searing veal, you definitely want to start hotter in the pan, use the oil and butter, and when the butter just starts to boil, it starts to bubble, it's the water evaporating out of it. Okay. To lay that veal, and please make sure when you work with the veal, you place it down and lay it away from you. So if the oil and the butter does splash up, it hits your backsplash and not your not your person there. Okay. So and then bring down the heat, because if you're going to do it all the way in the pan, especially at 16 ounces, it is a little thick. So you definitely want to get that caramelization. But you work your heat and lower it down so it will caramelize and then start to cook through. Flip it over. If you do like your veal a little cooked more, definitely I would think about maybe splitting, if you have the bone and the bulb of the veal, to definitely split down the center of it, so then you can lay it flat in the pan and you won't burn the meat itself, and you'll be able to.
So like a mini butterfly.
Mini butterfly.
Okay. What pan do you use? Just out of curiosity.
I would like, if I was able to rule the world and say, here, this is what you have to have. Definitely like a large black steel pan, or any kind of black steel pan. It will work anything you have, but they're pretty popular and you can get them anywhere right now. So definitely a black steel pan.
Excellent. Okay. Good to know. So we have, this is the butcher's choice. It has a butcher on the label. It is the Golden Retriever How You Doin' wine of the Palm. So wonderful, delicious. Thank you. Thank you all. Best discussion of a wine I've had in a while. So excellent. So the third wine that we're moving on to is the Lot 1981 Reserve Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, made for Del Frisco's by Duckhorn. So it's made by the iconic winemaking team at Duckhorn, including the lovely Dana Epperson, who is here to speak with us as part of that winemaking team. So Dana, can you tell us a little bit, just kind of an overview of Duckhorn's Cabernet philosophy? Because they've been around about 45 years, so they've been at it for a while.
Yeah, we've been at it for a while. So Dan and Margaret founded Duckhorn Vineyards in 1976. And actually in 1978, they released their inaugural release of our flagship Merlot, which Duckhorn is known for in the Valley, but also a Cabernet Sauvignon. So we have been producing Cabernet Sauvignon for over 40 years. So it's very important to us, as well as Merlot. And we do produce quite a bit of Sauvignon Blanc as well. But over the years, we've acquired many estate vineyards and we've worked with a lot of growers. So we have a lot of longstanding relationships with those growers. And I would say our primary focus for Cabernet Sauvignon in the Valley is to have a classic style and be true to the place and be true to the fruit. So we're looking for wines that are really well balanced. And like Stephanie was saying, it's all about balance, and we like to bring sort of that winemaker's touch, but it's all about what you're getting from the vineyard as well. So working with great vineyards all across the Valley. So Oakville, Rutherford, Yountville, up in the hills. I feel like this wine in particular is a great expression of that, since it's a blend of sort of all of those different regions. Right. And then just in general, we're looking for fruit forward. So we're looking for picking decisions that are balanced. So a little on the lower side. So nothing super ripe and raisiny and jammy. So we're looking for freshness, balance, and then refined tannin. And some of that refined tannin comes from the winemaking side as well. So, we're hand picking, we're doing gentle punch downs, we're pressing, but not too hard to try to extract nice soft tannins and be pretty well balanced. And then we're barrel aging about 40% new French oak. And then racking 3 times in the life of the wine to sort of add that oxygen and really soften up those tannins. I'm really curious as to what dog we think this wine might be representing.
Well, we will definitely have to get to that. But do you want to kind of walk us through tasting a little bit and kind of like what the goal is for 1981 as we taste it? And then we're going to totally hit up Keith for the...
I'm so curious as to what he thinks. So
the breed reveal.
I know. So this is a blend, predominantly Cabernet. It's about 90% Cabernet. It's about 9% Merlot and a tiny bit, so about 0.5% Cab Franc and Petit Verdot. So in this wine, I'm getting a lot of dark fruit, a lot of boysenberry, sort of blackberry cassis. I'm also getting a cool rustic backbone of sort of like an earthier graphite. And that's coming through with some black tea and sort of nice structure. And I feel like the structure is sort of framed with that new French oak, adding just that nice bit of sweetness, but well integrated. And just sort of that caramelized little essence on the finish.
Caramelized essence, I love that term. But I get it, like it makes sense when I'm tasting this. Yes, it does have a little bit more of that graphite, the earth, but like in a very subtle tone of fruit.
Yeah, and I think the dominant vineyards in this blend are coming from Rutherford, and Rutherford can have really well drained soils, and it's sort of known for that Rutherford dust, and it kind of gives that really fine tannin that it's known for, and it kind of can have that graphite-y sort of like soft tannin, but really dominant in the blend, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get to the recipe, Keith, let's pull to you first. It's called Lot 1981.
Yes.
Because
we were trying to find a way to kind of honor the history of Del Frisco's, and it was actually founded in 1981. So we thought, as we're coming up on that 40-year anniversary, why not celebrate that? So not quite as old as Duckhorn, but I love that the wine kind of reminds me of Napa cabs like back in the day. Like it's a little more restrained. It's not this kind of exaggeration of Napa that I feel like is really prevalent in the market nowadays. And I like that there is a little bit of green to it. There is a little bit of structure to it. There is that little bit of Rutherford dust. Like it takes me back to, learning about wine for the first time, working at Domaine Chandon many, many, many years ago, and like barrel tasting with Robert Mondavi, where it's like, this reminds me of that Napa late 80s, early 90s, and it kind of makes me happy. So Dana, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I feel like we've always tried to achieve that classic style over the years. I've sat through verticals where we've tasted all the way back to the 1978 inaugural release, and they're very similar in the way they were constructed and the fruit sourcing. You can tell there's a lot of nice balance there.
Yeah, well, and also kind of giving that shout out to the past. I mean, if anyone has hung out with Tom Rinaldi, the original winemaker, Tom likes to drink. And it's something about the wine that you want to drink.
He's
there you go.
Finish a bottle. And it's amazing how I feel like it's never been easier to make a wine that's great for a glass, but to make a wine that's great for a bottle has been lost a little bit. And I love that this kind of brings that back. Like, this is one of those ones where you'd like look up like, oh, where did it go? Like, I think we need another bottle. So,
fantastic. Yeah, wine by the bottle.
Yeah.
Perfect. Delicious. And what, and Keith, I'm going to come back to you for like talking about the pairing and of course the breed reveal, I'm going to call it that now, for the dogs. But Michael, if you could tell us a little bit about the New York strip steak recipe to go with this.
I think this Old Yeller will go really well with the, with the New York strips that we're doing. So a New York strip is definitely definitely a chewier steak than the ribeye we are talking about that we spoke about with that Morton's. So this is pan seared, and it's also then finished in the oven. Again, with using the pan and in the oven, a couple things you want to be able to achieve is get great caramelization on the meat, searing it very hard. So you want to use very high heat for this to be able to get it started on both sides. I personally using kosher salt to aggressively coating the steak, searing it on both sides, and finishing it in the oven. Now, it calls for using garlic. If you're going to be using garlic, the one thing you want to be careful is to have the garlic golden brown and not burn your garlic, because it will be very bitter. It'll make everything taste very bitter. So you definitely want to be aware of that. But your New York strip definitely wants to have a nice chew to it, and how this wine sounds definitely will go really, really well with it. So it's my own yeller with the New York strip.
Fantastic. Yes. And also, as a very amateur cook, that garlic burning will also make your smoke alarm possibly go off. So, FYI. So very careful with that.
I've definitely burnt out some apartments in New York City with the windows open, searing steaks. So,
There you go. So, but a good sear does everything. And so Keith, tell us a little bit about how this match works. We were talking about the subtlety, but the earthiness also of that kind of structure with this Cabernet with the New York steak. How does that work? And then you can tell us what dog this is.
Yeah. Well, I think Michael touched on a great point there. And for me, it's we don't talk a lot about it in the food and wine industry, but it's such an integral part is textures. And the texture of the wine, the texture of the food, and just like the subtle difference, like the texture of the New York versus that kind of buttery, fat emulsified ribeye versus the filet that is almost even softer. And I think that texture of the New York and a little bit of that chewiness, that little bit more firmer, more muscular cut of steak plays beautifully with the structure. And for me, it's like one of my rules of pairing. Not that there are any rules, that's the very first rule of food and wine pairing. But the one guideline that I really kind of stick to is try to match the weight of the wine with the weight of the food. And this really walks that line well, where it's big and a little bit more structured. So therefore that kind of firmness and chewiness of the New York plays beautifully off of that. And then you add in the flavors kind of playing off of each other, then that's just bonus. Like once you build the foundation, then you can kind of play in the house. And this is one of those ones that the structure matches up beautifully. Then it's just, all right, yummy, delicious. And I thought it was funny that in some of the food shots, there was actually the sprig of rosemary.
Yeah.
And there's just that little bit of rosemary coming through on the wine that I think would pair, that little lift.
Yeah, I think this had such a great herbal component going on, that sweet herb, so rosemary, others. So of course we're all dying to know what kind of, now that you've made this a thing, we've all got to know.
My initial kind of first go-to was just that little bit more of the coarseness, and this is not a knock in any way, but I was just thinking of like the fur and the fur of the dog, and this is it. Just my first initial was like Irish Wolfhound, this like super big. Friendly, but the fur's a little bit more coarse. But
there's like coarseness, but like a good coarseness, like I still wonder. Okay.
But then Chef threw out the lab, and I got to say, like the yellow lab's also a pretty solid call. So, I'm pretty happy either or.
I can't wait to tell my dog loving daughter about this. She's just gonna be like so excited. Not that she has any wine in her, but it's a great.
So, but thinking about it more, I definitely think maybe the lab, and I think it's one of those like we chef moments where it's just we chef.
Yeah, we chef. Okay.
Wins.
As we talked about before. So my last question, kind of speaking of all of these pairings, would be knowing kind of let's share all of our favorite either cuts of meat at a steakhouse or a menu favorite at a steakhouse. And Stephanie, I'm going to start with you. When you're at a steakhouse thinking about a big cab, what are you looking for?
I'm more of a traditionalist, a good filet mignon will never disappoint.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I actually rarely cook that at home, but I love
never
them at
cook it.
steakhouses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever I go out to a restaurant, my normal rule of thumb is it something that I'm going to cook at home? If I cook it at home, I probably won't order it. But if it's something that I would never cook at home, then I'm going to buy it at the restaurant. And the filet is something that I never cook at home.
I love that. That is my theory too. So yeah, fantastic. So Dana, I'm pulling you in because I know you're a vegetarian, calling that out. But I think it's important because I think there are a lot of people who are, and you should be welcome and loving a steakhouse, right? So on your perspective of favorites when you're there having Cabernet or anything else, like what do you pull together?
Yeah. So, for me, my personal favorite go-to at a steakhouse, which I eat at steakhouses a lot, Landry's and others, mushrooms. So mushrooms for me usually have a lot of butter in there, cooking with butter. So it has that fat, has that savory. That's my go-to sort of must-have. And then of course, accompany that with other things, potatoes, whatever it may be. When I did eat meat, it was definitely the New York. So I was glad that this wine was paired with the New York. I just love that balance of fat and sort of the texture, especially with wine. I think that's a really happy balance.
Excellent. And Michael, I'm not sure if it's like picking a favorite child for you, but do you have a favorite kind of meat you like to enjoy?
I do. Well, I tell you what, Stephanie used 2 examples, so I'm going to run off of her bad behavior there, and definitely. Well, Dana, I tell you what, we have a great, if you like potato and you like mushroom, we have at the Palm a great truffle gnocchi. That I think you would really, really like. That will tap on both of those.
That sounds delicious. I love truffles, so yeah, that would be perfect.
And then,
thank you for the recommendation.
But I'm definitely a New York strip person all day long. I love the texture, but I'm a sucker for somebody that has a prime rib, and I'm not even a ribeye person. But you have a prime rib on the menu, I definitely may have to put the New York on a side and go for the prime rib.
Yeah, good call. And Keith, any favorite? Maybe one that like might go with a multitude of wines.
I
Or
mean,
favorite and that, or maybe the one thing. I don't know.
I think you're in pretty good shape. I mean, that's the beauty of like the American steakhouse is like you get to walk in and say, I want this cut of meat and I want you to cook it this way with sometimes the exact sauce that you want. And it's the crazy, like we couldn't get a more American dining experience than the steakhouse. I would just say the ribeye, I think has the highest highs. It's kind of like the Pinot Noir of the steak world. Like when it's on, it is the best, but it also can be really bad at times. So the New York for me is like the Cabernet Sauvignon. It's reliable, it's delicious, and more times than not, it's going to be the best option on the menu.
Good. But the ribeye, you can always order at a Landry's restaurant and it'll be spot on, right?
Absolutely. But
so there you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you have a good cut of meat, you're going to be great. And this is definitely where you can do it. So for everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. These are wonderful places, Landry's, the Palm, Morton Steakhouse, and Del Frisco's classics all throughout the country, wonderful places to visit, enjoy food, and obviously the wine. So as I mentioned, this trio of wines, if you wanted to purchase it outside of the steakhouse, it is exclusive in a trio format at Wine.com, still available there. And of course, this video lives on our YouTube channel if you want to taste along again once you have the wines. And then, of course, again, you can enjoy them at the Palm and Morton's and Del Frisco's. But Stephanie and Dana, Michael, Keith, thank you so much for your time and your insights. And I learned a lot, and now I know about dogs and wine and like more pairings. Anyway, delicious wines. I look forward to enjoying them at home or, of course, dining out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And cheers.
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 Okay.
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, and now our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com. Seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app today.